On today's episode of Locked On Oilers, the rematch against the Kraken, Klim Kostin, the cult hero, and the Bakersfield Condors Report. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Oilers podcast. I am your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. As mentioned on today's episode, we're going to start off with a little bit of a preview of the matchup between the Edmonton Oilers and the Seattle Kraken. As a rematch from last Friday's game, and that was a pretty interesting game and a real banger, if you ask Oilers fans. We'll talk about that one in just a bit. But also on today's episode, the cult hero that has become in Klim Kostin. Klim Kostin has just taken over Edmonton, and as someone who is in the building against the Winnipeg Jets, Edmonton loves Klim Kostin. But why? We will talk about that a little later on as well. And now to wrap up today's episode, we will talk about the Bakersfield Condors Report as the calendar flips over to 2023. How have some of the Bakersfield Condors players performed under new coaching? We will talk about that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Alrighty, let's get started off with the Edmonton Oilers and the Seattle Kraken as we have puck drop between the Edmonton Oilers and the Kraken in the rematch at 7 o'clock here at Rogers Place in Edmonton. And the last time these two teams played, the Edmonton Oilers rocked the Seattle Kraken 7-2. It was 3-0 before most people could even get the game on. The Edmonton Oilers were absolutely rocking in Seattle, and the Oilers look to do the same. And it looks like Leon Draisaitl will be in the lineup, at least as Jay Woodcroft said he will be available in this one against the Seattle Kraken. So we are an optional skate for the Edmonton Oilers today before the game, but on Monday the Edmonton Oilers had a practice. And we're running off a little bit of those lines as this is a look at what it may look like for the Edmonton Oilers tonight. Not confirmed yet, but this is what it may look like for the Oilers against the Kraken tonight as Zach Hyman, Connor McDavid, and Jesse Puljujarvi will make up that top line for the Oilers. Had a very good game against the Kraken on Friday. And yes, as mentioned, he is available, and that's Leon Draisaitl. So the assumption is he will play against the Kraken tonight. Warren Foegele and Kyler Yamamoto will be his wingers. Matthias Janmark, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, and Klim Kostin will make up the third line. And Dylan Holloway, Ryan McLeod, and Derek Ryan will make up the fourth line. Once again, the Oilers able to run with that spine of the team, with McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, and McLeod up the middle. Now on the back end, Darnell Nurse with Cody Ceci, Brett Kulak and Tyson Barrie, Philip Broberg, and Evan Bouchard with the third pairing. It sounds like Stuart Skinner will get the start for the Oilers against the Kraken, just as he did on Friday as well. On the Seattle side, as you assume that there might be some movement for the Seattle Kraken team against the Edmonton Oilers, as they pulled Grubauer early. You need adjustments against the Edmonton Oilers. So right now, here's what the lines look like for the Kraken heading into the game. As Andre Burakovsky lines up on the top line with Matty Beniers and Jordan Eberle. Jaden Schwartz is on the second line with Wenberg and McCann. Ely Tolvanen on the third line alongside Gort and Bjorkstrand, and Brandon Tanev, who fought They got double minors, but we'll call it a fight with Klim Kostin. Brendan Tanev on the fourth line with Donato and Sprong. The fourth line. The defensive pairings for the Seattle Kraken. Former Oiler Adam Larsson alongside Vince Dunn, who fought Dylan Holloway in Holloway's first NHL fight. We'll talk about that in just a second as well. Jamie Alexiak alongside Justin Schultz. Carter Suchi alongside Will Borgen and Philip Grubauer. Not confirmed in the net right now, but we're just going to put Grubauer in there as the starter for now. We will update you if we do get anything during this episode. But as mentioned in that 7-2 game, Dylan Holloway getting into his first NHL, his first pro fight with Vince Dunn. And yeah, it was a little bit of a shell shock maybe for Dylan Holloway, as he did get rocked going down to the ice. But what's nice about Dylan Holloway and about the situation was he was able to look up and have a little bit of a sense of humor with it as well, and get a little bit of a chuckle when he saw the replay. But being able to see him not back down against a guy who has had experience throwing the mitts a couple of times with Vince Dunn. I believe he was the one who was on that off-ice brawl in the AHL with a couple of AHLers fighting in like the tunnel. So a guy who is seasoned in fighting for a guy in Dylan Holloway who isn't, especially for a guy, yes, he played in the AJHL. You get fights here and there, but in the AJ, if you fight, you're out of the game. So there wasn't really many fights in the AJ, and then he went over to the NCAA where you have cages on. You can't fight there. So for a kid who hasn't really fought before, he stood his own pretty well. And of course, Klim Kostin and Brandon Tanev went at it. Now, it was kind of unclear how it all started, but somebody pulled up a clip, and it looked like Tanev made a run. I believe it was on either Holloway or Janmark, if I'm not mistaken. And he just, I believe it was on McLeod. And Kostin just went, no, that ain't it. That's my teammate. Went after him. Gloves were thrown. And punches were thrown, really. And Kostin also getting the fight there. It was a full game for the Edmonton Oilers in that one. The Oilers also went 2 for 2 on the power play and kept the Seattle Kraken at an 0-for on their power play. The Oilers going 3 for 3 shorthanded on the penalty kill, as the Kraken went 0 for 3 on the power play as well. Kostin fought in that game. He also scored 2 goals in that one. Again, it was a double minor, but he did get 2 goals in that one. Almost had the hat trick there. Puljujarvi getting his first goal in a little bit as well in that one. Holloway with the fight. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins with 4 assists in the game. And then Connor McDavid, a goal and 4 assists. Just had to get that one as well. And Zach Hyman, 2 goals and assists. 3 points against the Seattle Kraken. The Edmonton Oilers will look to try and keep the run going, at least against the Kraken, especially against a Pacific Division team. That is the big thing, is that this is a Pacific Division team. All the points, especially against Pacific teams, are very important. You need to try, especially if it goes, you have to prevent overtimes as well. If you can try and prevent the other team from getting even a loser point, that's massive. These are some big games for the Edmonton Oilers coming up, and this is a big game tonight between the Edmonton Oilers and the Seattle Kraken. As mentioned, a 7 o'clock puck drop between the Oilers and the Kraken at Rogers Place. And lining up, as mentioned, on the third line is Klim Kostin. And Klim Kostin has become an absolute cult hero in Edmonton. But why? We will talk about that in just a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, news, stats, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball. And yes, I know the World Cup is over, but the calendar has flipped. La Liga is back. Premier League is back. Ligue 1. We can go through all the European leagues. They are back, and they are all on BetOnline. Heck, I'm pretty sure the Turkish Super League is on there. Plus, if you love sports podcasts, which if you're listening to this one, you probably do, you can find those at BetOnline as well. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Alrighty, moving on to Klim Kostin, as Klim Kostin has been an absolute revelation for the Edmonton Oilers, and I will not lie to you. Yes, I have been very vocal on my love for Klim Kostin, and I've been very vocal on the fact that I was a big supporter of Klim Kostin from the time that he was in junior hockey. You know who else is a major supporter of Klim Kostin? Edmonton Oilers fans. And as somebody who is in Rogers Place on Saturday when the Edmonton Oilers took on the Winnipeg Jets, I have never heard anybody get an ovation at Rogers Place than what I heard for Klim Kostin. Other than McDavid and Draisaitl, I understand. But other than those two, that building blew up whenever Kostin's name was mentioned. When Kyler Yamamoto got high-sticked for the power play at the end of the game against the Winnipeg Jets, and he had to come off because he was still bleeding, and Klim Kostin hopped over the boards, the ovation was nearly deafening. Everybody wanted to see Klim Kostin step onto the ice and produce on that power play. And Edmonton Oilers on the ice seemingly were giving him opportunities. Got a chance in front of the net, got a shot off, was given the chance, and that was the thing. Just like he said, hey, I'm not 97, I'm 21. I'm just trying to get to the front of the net. Don't set me up. Just let me play my game. And that's a great mindset for a player like him, where a whole bunch of players or a whole bunch of everybody, all the fans are giving him all this praise. I'm here right now talking about it. Everybody has been talking about it. How Klim Kostin has come out here and changed the way the Edmonton Oilers look at bottom six forwards. And that's good. But for Klim Kostin to sit there and go, hey, I'm just a north-south player. I just want to play my game up and down, play it right. That's the right mentality. And that's exciting to hear. Now, the other thing was when Klim Kostin went down with his injury. Yes, the horn had just went. The Winnipeg Jets win the game. But that place, you could genuinely hear a pin drop. Waited with bated breath, as everybody waited for Klim Kostin to get up and get off the ice. And once he got up, and yes, he lost his skate blade, so it looked a little worse than it actually was. But once he got up and skated off, Rogers Place sounded like the Edmonton Oilers had just won the game. Edmonton Oilers fans were more excited for the fact that Klim Kostin had just stood up and skated off the ice relatively on his own power, but with some help with some of his teammates, than they were with the loss. That is the power of this player. But why? Why are Oilers fans so enthralled with this player? Well, in the last 3 games, he has 3 goals in the last 2 games. 2 goals against the Seattle Kraken, a division rival right now, and the Winnipeg Jets are far from a team that Edmonton Oilers fans dislike. The Winnipeg Jets are a team the Edmonton Oilers fans just do not really like. He goes out there, plays hard every game. Heck, he had 9 hits in a recent game. 9 hits. The Edmonton Oilers haven't had that in a while this season. I don't think once this season. Maybe Evander Kane earlier in the year. But other than that, not very many people have. Especially with Marcus Niemelainen playing in weighted minutes. he's been the guy who has been playing physical hockey. In fact, so much so that his hits per 60 minutes sits second on the Oilers, only behind Brad Malone, which is saying something because Brad Malone's only played a certain amount of games and is now down with Bakersfield. But he has 17.57 hits per 60 minutes for the Edmonton Oilers. And then, not only that, but he's also producing offensively, where in the last, since the December 23rd game, he has 3.96 goals for per 60 minutes, which is at 5-on-5, which is good for 5th on the Edmonton Oilers. And then his goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 is at a 1.92, which is good for 4th. And then in all situations is at a 1.89, which is good for 3rd. He is producing offensively. He is producing defensively in all situations at 5-on-5. And now, at the end of that Jets game, he was on the power play because he deserved it. And yes, there are other players who can be on the power play. And yes, a player had to come off and you had to throw somebody else out there. You could have put anybody out there. But Klim Kostin deserved that chance. That's what's important. That is what is important. Now, there are also some other interesting stats that I don't really go into too often, but I was going through the NHL site and looking at NHL stats for the Oilers, and a couple really stood out to me for Klim Kostin. Goals per 60 minutes for Klim Kostin is at a 1.37. Goals per 60 minutes. That's goals per game, essentially. But goals per 60 minutes sits at a 1.37, which is second on the Oilers, second to only Connor McDavid. Then his points per 60 minutes is at a 2.20, which sits at 4th on the Edmonton Oilers. And his shooting percentage is the best on the team with an 18.5. He's a smart shooter. He gets to smart places. He is producing. He is converting. And he's helping his team win any way he can. Those hits, preventing goals, producing goals. He can do it all right now. And let's not forget, he's a first-round pick. There's a reason why he's a first-round pick. I'm not saying he's going to be a top 10 talent or top 6 talent for the Oilers, but you get drafted because you're good at certain things. And this is why Klim Kostin was drafted. Now, it's a matter of being able to continue it and stay focused and stay consistent. But he's only 22 games into his Edmonton Oilers career, has 65 hits. But either way, Klim Kostin, the cult hero in Edmonton, we shall see if he can keep it going for the Edmonton Oilers. Let's wrap up today's episode with the Bakersfield Condors Report, as I'm sure the Condors would genuinely like Klim Kostin back on their team, but too much success for him up there, as the Condors have been having a very tumultuous season so far with some very interesting storylines, and heading into the new year, maybe some changes coming for the team. How has the team been coached so far? A couple of things to discuss in today's Bakersfield Condors Report. But first, I want to thank you for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On NHL Prospects, your daily podcast covering the next generation of hockey superstars leading up to the NHL draft, plus NHL draft rankings and top prospect comparisons for every team. Locked On NHL Prospects, available on YouTube and wherever you find your podcast. Alrighty, moving on to our final segment of today's episode, the Bakersfield Condors Report. And not too much to report on in regards to games for the Bakersfield Condors since the last time we talked about the Condors. Only one game since then, and it was an unfortunate 2-1 loss for the Condors to the hands of the Calgary Wranglers, as Alex Peters getting the only goal for the Condors in that one. Dino Cambites getting the assist. But a couple things to talk about now as the schedule flips over, or the calendar flips to 2023. As mentioned, some questions around the coaching right now. Coach Colin Chalk for the Condors is questions around his deployment of the team, questions around really what his plan is in regards to development for players like Xavier Bourgault and some players that we're going to talk about as well, in Raphael Lavoie, Carter Savoy, and another player that I want to talk about is Michael Kesselring. Currently, the Bakersfield Condors leading goal scorer, the first AHL defenseman to 10 goals in the league, and a guy that doesn't get a lot of chatter around the big club. But why not? He's 6'5". The kid can skate. He can clearly score. He sits third on the Condors in points, along with his goals as well, with 13 points. There. Where's the love for Michael Kesselring? But then there's also a guy like Raphael Lavoie, who was drafted by the Edmonton Oilers a couple years ago in the second round. At points was given a first-round talent tab as well. In fact, I had him going, I believe, 16th or 17th overall to the Pittsburgh Penguins in his draft. My concern around Raphael Lavoie at the time was whether or not his talents could translate to the NHL, to the pros, really, to the big game. And right now, it's been a little bit of an issue for him sticking with the Condors, getting playing time, staying healthy, and sometimes has looked like he has been a little out of place. However, as of recently, Lavoie has really looked good for the Condors, has chalked up a couple assists for the Condors, now is tied for 5th on the team in goals with 4 right now, with 4 other guys, including Carter Savoy, who we'll talk about in a bit, Tyler Tullio, who's been getting some love as well from Bruce Kurlock, who is a fantastic writer right now for Oilers Nation, has a great insight on the Bakersfield Condors, and great finger on the heartbeat as well for the Condors as well. Make sure you look at his work, as well as Ryan Holt, Condors Holty, on Twitter. There, I believe, beat reporter for them there. Great resources for the Condors. But yeah, he's also the tied with Justin Bailey, not to get sidetracked, in goals for the Condors. But let's now, first of all, Lavoie, what he's been doing different that has really given him that extra step is exactly that, is that he's been skating more. That's what has really been his strong suit, is when he's good, he's moving his feet. And that's exactly what Bruce Kurlock was saying, is that once he is moving his feet, it's an issue for the defenseman. Sometimes he doesn't always do that. Sometimes he trusts his length a little more and gets caught up in that little game there. But has been doing that for the Condors so far, as of recent. So hopefully he can keep that going. Another player I want to mention is, as mentioned, Carter Savoy as well. As Kurlock has said that this has been the best few weeks, best weeks as a pro for Carter Savoy. However, Savoy has gone down with an injury, has been great, but has gone down with an injury after an unfortunate hit against the Condors, or against the Calgary Wranglers, Not sure how long he will be out, but not great considering he's been having a very decent last couple of weeks. So a guy to maybe watch out for in the news is Carter Savoy. Hopefully he can stay healthy here, because as Kurlock has said, Savoy has been exactly what people want him to be within the organization so far. So if he can keep progressing, maybe can be a piece of the Edmonton Oilers in the future. But for right now, as mentioned, they haven't played in a little while. Their next game is tomorrow against the Ontario Reign. A 6:30 puck drop, I believe it is locally, so 7:30 here Mountain Time in Edmonton. Just to give you a little bit of an update on the stats for the Condors. As mentioned, Michael Kesselring leads the way in goals for the Condors with 10. Seth Griffith is 9 goals on the season. Xavier Bourgault has 8 and sits third on the Condors. Phil Kemp, another player, another defenseman maybe to watch out for the Edmonton Oilers as well, coming up with Michael Kesselring. He has 5, and as mentioned, 4 players in Justin Bailey, Tyler Tullio, Raphael Avon, Carter Savoy all have 4 goals on the season, tied for 5th on the team. Assists, Seth Griffith is running away with it in assists. 17 assists on the year for Griffith. He's having a very solid year for the Condors. Next, Jason Demers, who just signed that deal with the Edmonton Oilers, a 2-way deal there. Luke Esposito sits third on the team with 10. Demers has 11. Then Xavier Bourgault, Brad Malone, and Tyler Benson all tied for 4th with 7 there. And then when it comes to points, Seth Griffith with 26 points, Xavier Bourgault 15, Michael Kesselring 3rd with 13, Luke Esposito with 12 points, and then Phil Kemp and Jason Demers tied for 5th with 11 points there. And of course, Olivier Rodrigue has shockingly been carrying the weight for the Condors and has been doing a pretty good job, all things considered. 7-10-0 on the year so far, but has a .911 save percentage and a 2.98 goals against. A sub-3 goals against is pretty solid for a team who has lost 9-2 recently, and both other goaltenders on the Condors in Ryan Fanti and Calvin Pickard both have above a 3 goals against, 3.12 for Pickard and Fanti at a 3.46. So not great. Rodrigue also the only goaltender with a save percentage above 900. In fact, of course, he has a 910, but also above 910, but also above 900. As Pickard has a .899 and Fanti with a .895. So a lot of questions going around Bakersfield, a lot to do with the development of some players, but we shall see what happens with the new year. Either way, this was the first episode of the new year, so I want to wish you a very happy new year to you and your family. Hopefully, please stay safe and have a wonderful, wonderful year. Enjoy the game tonight as the Edmonton Oilers and the Seattle Kraken face off in Edmonton with a 7 o'clock puck drop at Rogers Place, and hopefully at the end of it we can play La Bamba, baby.